Imagine standing on a mountain ridge so high that the air feels thin and sharp in your lungs. The wind howls across endless valleys, carrying the sound of nothing. No cars, no cities, no voices. Just silence. For centuries, this part of the world seemed untouchable, too wild and too remote for human ambition. But that silence is slowly being replaced by the grind of machines, the rumble of trucks, and the steady rhythm of construction. Something big is unfolding high in the Himalayas, quietly, carefully, and with a clear purpose. Across these towering peaks, roads are snaking through the rock where no path existed before. Runways are stretching longer into the thin air, built to handle aircraft that can operate where oxygen is scarce. Rivers once left to carve their own courses are now held back by massive dams. At first glance, it looks like progress. Development meant to connect people, bring power, and modernize remote areas. But when you take a step back, it becomes clear that it's not just the mountains being reshaped, it's the balance of power across Asia. These projects are massive, on a scale rarely seen outside times of war. Entire valleys are being redesigned for speed, for access, for movement. And in this part of the world, accessibility is everything. The border that separates India and China, known as the line of actual control, isn't marked by fences or walls. It's defined by presence, by who can patrol, who can build, and who can stay. Every new road or airstrip isn't just about infrastructure, it's a silent statement of control. China's approach is both clever and deliberate. Many of these new constructions serve dual purposes. On paper, they're civilian. Roads to connect villages, airports to improve travel, hydropower dams to bring electricity. But beneath that surface, they hold clear military value. Each new road allows faster troop movement. Each runway means jets can take off at a moment's notice. Each dam gives control over water flow, a resource more powerful than oil in the long run. And when you see where these facilities are placed, it's clear they're meant to look down, literally, on the rest of South Asia. Beyond the strategy, there's another layer driving this transformation: resources. Tibet, sitting like a crown on Asia's head, is rich in minerals. Beneath its rocky soil lie chromium, copper, lithium, borax, and something even more valuable today: uranium. That single element has quietly become one of the most sought-after resources in the world. Why? Because the future of energy is shifting, and nuclear power is making a comeback. Even the biggest names in tech, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Meta, are investing heavily in nuclear energy to power their massive AI data centers. That's where companies like F3 Uranium come in. Based in Canada's Athabasca Basin, one of the richest uranium regions on Earth, F3 recently made a major discovery known as the JR Zone, already being compared to world-class sites like NextGen's Arrow and Fission's RRR. With global uranium demand expected to surge more than 120% by 2030 and double again by 2040, F3 Uranium is perfectly positioned for the future. Backed by a billion-dollar experienced team, solid insider ownership, and new funding from Denison Mines, the company is charging forward fast, right as the world's hunger for clean, reliable nuclear energy takes off. So while the rest of the world debates energy policy, China builds. Since 2020 alone, more than 300 new infrastructure projects have been launched across Tibet. The legendary G219 highway, which once took weeks to navigate, has been expanded and fortified. What used to be a slow, treacherous journey across some of the world's highest terrain can now move armored vehicles from Xinjiang to Tibet in a matter of days. But it doesn't stop with one road or one project. Far from it. The same kind of massive upgrades are now being rolled out across other key highways, like the G315 and G318. On a map, they look like ordinary roads twisting through the mountains. In reality, they've become something far more strategic. Each one acts as a corridor, built not just for travelers or trade, but for tanks, troop convoys, and heavy equipment. They're the arteries of a new kind of mobility in the high Himalayas, giving China the power to move fast toward places like Ladakh and Arunachal Pradesh, where tensions with India have flared before. Airfields across Tibet are also being transformed. Take Shigatse Heping, for example. What once looked like a quiet civilian airport has evolved into a full-scale military hub. Around its runways, new garrisons have appeared. Drone hangars have gone up. The airfield now hosts fighter jets like the J-11, with newly built helipads and missile defense systems standing guard nearby. Each upgrade adds another layer of strength, making it capable of supporting high-altitude operations that few countries could even attempt. And it's not just happening in one place. Similar expansion projects are unfolding at Shannon Longzhi and Ngari Gunsa airports. The latter sits only about 200 kilometers from Pangong Lake, the same icy stretch of water where Chinese and Indian soldiers once fought hand-to-hand in brutal, close-quarters clashes. Up north, more airfields, Shachayarkant, Yutian and Ngari Burang, have been reinforced and modernized, each capable of handling both civilian flights and military deployments. Put all that together, and you start to see the pattern. A vast, interconnected web of air power. These upgraded facilities join an already powerful network that includes long-standing bases in Lhasa Gonggur, Damsung, Ningchi Mainling, Chengdu Bangda, Hotan Kungong, and Tashkurgan Kunjarab. The skies over the Himalayas are being redesigned, not just for travel, but for control. But Beijing's ambitions don't end with airports. Now, the plan is to link many of these high-altitude bases by rail. One of the most ambitious of these is the Sichuan-Tibet Railway, a project so massive it's often compared to building a steel bridge through the clouds. When it's complete, trains will be able to travel from Chengdu to Lhasa in under 13 hours, crossing nearly 1,600 kilometers of rugged, earthquake-prone terrain. And it won't stop there. Branch lines are expected to extend even closer to the Indian border, cutting through some of the most difficult geography on Earth. With every kilometer of track, China's ability to shift troops, supplies, and heavy machinery across the plateau grows faster and more efficient. But military power doesn't always wear camouflage or fly under radar. Sometimes it flows quietly through rivers. That's why many of these new development projects in Tibet are tied directly to hydropower. China already holds the world's largest hydropower potential, nearly 3 times greater than that of the United States. Since the 1950s, the country has built more than 20,000 dams taller than 15 meters. Hydropower has become China's second-largest source of electricity, and Tibet alone provides nearly a third of that energy. Yet the real power of these dams isn't just in electricity, it's in control. Tibet is the starting point of some of Asia's most important rivers, the Brahmaputra, the Mekong, and the Salween. These waterways are the lifelines of millions across South and Southeast Asia. Whoever controls their flow controls the fate of entire nations downstream. That's why China's next big project, the Maedog Mega Dam, has caught the world's attention. Hidden deep in a remote corner of the Himalayas on the Yarlung Tsangpo River, this colossal dam is expected to become the largest on Earth. The numbers are staggering, an estimated cost of $137 billion and a planned output of 60 gigawatts of power, about 3 times more than the already gigantic Three Gorges Dam. Once completed, it could generate enough electricity to light up 300 million homes. And it's not alone. Farther west, on the Mabja Zangbo River, another mega dam is quietly taking shape. China has released few details, no official height, no confirmed capacity, but what's known is enough to paint the picture. This, too, will be massive. Piece by piece, dam by dam, road by road, China is building more than infrastructure. It's crafting leverage, control over the land, the sky, and even the water that sustains life below the mountains. Here's where things start to get even more complicated, and far more worrying. Experts fear that once these enormous dams become operational, China could end up holding a kind of invisible power, the ability to weaponize water itself. Imagine this: during a political standoff or a tense negotiation, a single decision upstream could unleash floods downstream, drowning farmland and cities in India or Bangladesh. Or, just as easily, China could hold back the flow, leaving entire regions gasping under severe drought. Sounds like something out of a thriller, right? But the concern isn't imaginary. It's rooted in very real possibilities. Take the Maedog Megadam, for example. It sits on the upper reaches of the Yarlung Tsangpo River, which becomes the Brahmaputra once it crosses into India. That same river is the lifeline for millions, feeding the fields of Arunachal Pradesh and Assam, and flowing all the way into Bangladesh. Any major change in its flow can ripple through communities, economies, and ecosystems far downstream. What makes this even more sensitive is that Arunachal Pradesh isn't just any state, it's a flashpoint. China calls it South Tibet and claims it as its own territory, even though India administers it fully. So when Beijing pushes forward with dam building in that region, it's not just about generating electricity. It's a statement, an assertion of control, a step closer to something analysts now call hydrohegemony in South Asia. And if history teaches us anything, it's that this isn't a first. Back in the 1990s, China constructed a series of dams along the Mekong River in Yunnan province. At first, few paid attention. But over the years, those dams reduced the river's flow by nearly half, leaving countries like Thailand, Laos, and Myanmar struggling with droughts, collapsing fish populations, and lost farmland. The lesson? When China builds upstream, everyone downstream feels it. And now, with even larger and more powerful dams rising in Tibet, many fear that history is about to repeat itself, only this time on a much bigger stage. But why now? What's driving this unprecedented surge of construction and energy expansion? The answer lies in a new kind of race, one not fought with armies, but with algorithms. The global boom in artificial intelligence has kicked off a technological arms race unlike anything we've seen before. Training advanced AI systems requires staggering computing power, and that, in turn, demands electricity. Lots of it. To put it in perspective, a single hyperscale data center, those massive buildings filled with servers running nonstop, can consume between 100 and 200 megawatts of power. That's enough energy to keep an entire small city running. Multiply that by hundreds of data centers worldwide, and the scale of energy demand becomes hard to fathom. According to Goldman Sachs, electricity consumption from data centers is expected to rise 50% by 2027, and as much as 165% by 2030 compared to 2023 levels. In other words, the world's hunger for digital intelligence is quickly becoming a hunger for power. Literal power. China, always playing the long game, isn't waiting to be caught short. It's building ahead of demand. While electricity generation in the United States has stayed almost flat since the late 1990s, China's output has more than quadrupled, and it's showing no signs of slowing down. From coal to solar, and especially hydropower, Beijing is determined to keep expanding its energy reserves to fuel the next stage of its technological rise. That's where Tibet becomes a critical piece of the puzzle. Its rivers flow year-round, fed by melting glaciers and steady rainfall, and their high altitude gives them tremendous natural energy potential. To China, the Himalayas aren't just a rugged border zone, they're an untapped energy powerhouse. So every new railway that snakes its way into Tibet, every dam that rises along its rivers, serves a double purpose. On one hand, it strengthens China's strategic foothold near the Indian border. On the other, it feeds the growing energy needs of an AI-powered economy. This is why analysts say the Himalayan buildup isn't just about military dominance, it's about control, resilience, and readiness. The same network that can move soldiers and supplies in a crisis can also channel power and data in peacetime. It's infrastructure that works for war and for wealth. And yet, there's an unexpected twist to all of this. For all the talk of expansion and projection, Beijing's grand strategy in the Himalayas might not be as aggressive as it looks on the surface. Some experts argue it's actually a form of deterrence, a way of preparing for peace by ensuring readiness for conflict. China's real strategic gaze, after all, is fixed eastward, toward the Pacific and toward Taiwan. That's the core of its long-term planning, the issue it considers non-negotiable. Any conflict over Taiwan would almost certainly draw in foreign powers, including the United States. To counter that, Beijing has been working to stretch American attention and resources thin, across multiple flashpoints like Iran, Ukraine, and beyond.
If you've made it this far into the video, it means you're enjoying what we do here at Euro Bulletin. Take a second to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss more updates and insights from Europe and its partners. Let's dive in more into the subject.
Still, even as China's focus remains on the eastern seaboard, it can't afford to ignore what's happening to its southwest. India is no longer a passive neighbor. It's a rising regional force with growing influence and alliances of its own. And that makes the high mountains between them not just a frontier, but a fault line, one that's quietly being reinforced, redefined, and rebuilt piece by piece. Now, imagine for a moment that tensions in the Pacific suddenly flare. China moves east, its military attention locked on Taiwan. Warships crowd the strait, and the People's Liberation Army pours resources into its coastal front. In that scenario, the western mountains, those cold, desolate stretches of rock and ice that form the line of actual control with India, would inevitably thin out. And that's where things could get interesting. Because a distracted China could give India something rare in geopolitics, an opening, a tactical window to press its long-standing claims in Aksai Chin, the second major disputed region between the two. Today, Aksai Chin sits under Chinese control, but India insists it belongs to them. It's an empty, wind-beaten plateau, but its value isn't in what it holds. It's in where it lies. It connects Tibet to Xinjiang, serving as a vital corridor in China's western defense grid. If India were to make even a small move there while Chinese troops were focused eastward, the ripple effects would be enormous. And it wouldn't stop with India and China alone. Pakistan would be pulled into the picture too. For decades, Islamabad has relied on Beijing for logistical and military support. But if Chinese forces were tied down near Taiwan, that lifeline could weaken. In that moment of vulnerability, India might see another opportunity: Gilgit-Baltistan. Tucked high in the mountains, Gilgit-Baltistan is more than just another rugged region. It's the heart of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, the crucial land bridge that connects western China to the Arabian Sea. If India were ever to push into that area, even slightly, the impact would be far greater than the territory itself. It would effectively sever Pakistan's main artery to China, choking off the most strategic route in Beijing's Belt and Road network. The move wouldn't collapse Pakistan, but it would redraw the map of influence in South Asia in ways few could ignore. And just to be clear, this isn't a prediction or a policy pitch. It's an observation. In geopolitics, there's no simple good or bad, no heroes or villains. There are only interests, and the pursuit of them. From Beijing's point of view, though, all of this hypothetical talk isn't so hypothetical. China knows that if war ever breaks out over Taiwan, India could be tempted to act while its forces are stretched thin. Which is exactly why China's militarization of the Himalayas isn't just posturing, it's prevention. Every new road, runway, and rail line in Tibet serves one core purpose: to deny India the belief that it could strike first and get away with it. The Himalayas, then, aren't just a border, they're a buffer. A second front, not designed to launch an attack, but to stop one before it begins. By reinforcing its western flank with new highways, fortified air bases, and rapid response units, Beijing is sending a calculated message. Even if we're busy in the east, we can still hold the west. It's classic military logic: simple, cold, and effective. Good infrastructure buys time. Roads mean mobility. Railways mean reach. Airports mean reinforcement. The faster you can move, the less likely your enemy is to move against you. And even if a two-front war sounds unlikely, sometimes the illusion of readiness is just as powerful as readiness itself. If your rival believes you can respond instantly, they might never risk finding out whether you really can. But there's a catch. Perception is a double-edged sword. But perception, as always, cuts both ways. From New Delhi's vantage point, China's new highways and bases aren't symbols of defense. They're signs of encroachment. Every new airstrip, every radar dome, every dual-use facility in Tibet feels like one more quiet step across the line. India sees what Beijing calls insurance as slow-motion expansion. After all, when trust is missing, even a bunker can look like a forward base. So here's the paradox of the Himalayas today. What one side builds to prevent war, the other sees as preparation for one. What's meant to stabilize can, just as easily, escalate. It's a mountain standoff where even peace feels like a balancing act. And that raises deeper questions. Questions that echo far beyond the snow peaks. If both sides believe they're acting defensively, who then is the aggressor? At what point does deterrence become provocation? And in a place where altitude defines advantage, is the real battle fought on the ground, or in perception itself? To be clear, India is not without strength. Along its northern frontier, it operates more than a dozen air bases, each one a vital node in its defensive chain. The Indian Air Force is experienced, battle-tested, and backed by decades of hard training in extreme terrain. Yet, when you compare numbers, the gap in air power is impossible to ignore. China holds a clear edge both in quantity and in quality. Its factories are rolling out fifth-generation fighters at industrial speed, and plans for sixth-generation aircraft are already in the works. India, meanwhile, is still struggling to mass-produce dependable fourth-generation jets, with no fully functional fifth-gen prototype yet to show. It's not just about planes. China's defense budget towers over India's, and its active military personnel far outnumber those across the border. With every passing year, that imbalance becomes more difficult to overlook. Step back, and the full picture begins to emerge. Across the sweeping arc of the Himalayas, China's construction frenzy continues. Roads, rails, airfields, and dams, all expanding its reach. On paper, there's nothing illegal or extraordinary about it. Every country, after all, has the right to build within its borders. But the Himalayas are not just mountains, they're mirrors. They reflect intent, amplify suspicion, and turn every movement into a message. So even as Beijing builds to deter, it may be unintentionally daring New Delhi to respond. And that leads to the most unsettling question of all. In trying to prevent the next war, could China be quietly laying the groundwork for one? And so, here we are. Two ancient civilizations staring at each other across a wall of ice and sky. Every new road, every jet, every dam adds another layer to a story that has no easy ending. Both sides claim to seek peace, yet both prepare for the possibility of war. Each believes it's acting out of caution, but every act of caution fuels the other's suspicion. It's a delicate balance, one built not on trust, but on calculation. The Himalayas have become less a natural barrier and more a chessboard, one where every move is deliberate and every silence is strategic. But where does that path lead? Can two rising powers build side by side without colliding? Will technology and trade cool tempers or only raise the stakes higher? When deterrence becomes indistinguishable from provocation, how long before someone blinks, or worse, stops blinking altogether? And if a spark were to ignite among the snow peaks, would the world be ready for the avalanche that follows? The mountains have stood for millions of years, unmoved and indifferent. But the people building atop them? They're racing time itself, not just to control the land, but to define the future. So the real question isn't whether China or India will prevail. It's whether, in trying to secure their place in history, either will realize just how fragile that future truly is.